I saw a parallel between the second Maccabees chapter 7 and Luke chapter 20, verses 27 to 38. Both dealt with seven men related to one woman, and they all faced death. So it led me to two questions. So the first one, do we truly know what's meant by life? And this encompasses, do we truly know what's meant by birth? Do we truly know what's meant by death? Going to the second Maccabees, chapter 7, and I took it as the seven brothers and the mother knew what true life is. It's abiding with and in God. And so they're not afraid of death. Their fear is only on turning away from God. Verses 22 through 23. This is the mother speaking to her son as they're trying to make him turn. And the mother was kind of talking to the son about standing firm on their decision not to turn away from God. So the mother says, I do not know how you came to be in my womb. It was not I who gave you breath and life, nor was it I who arranged the elements you are made of. Therefore, since it is the creator of the universe who shaped the beginning of humankind and brought about the origin of everything, he, in his mercy, give you back both breath and life because you now disregard your soul for the sake of his law. And so that's why in facing death, they really had no issue with it because their eyes were set on God and they knew God is life. And that's all that really matters.
You know, a basic stance of humanity to the divine is God and we're not. Michael Himes used to teach that when he was at Boston College. God is God and we're not. If you get that down, then it's all downhill from there, kind of, because then your prayer is always, well, then God be God. And just let me be open to how that interfaces with my life and expresses itself in my life so that I start to be like more aware, more on tiptoe, more poised to receive it. And that, I think, is the entirety of the spiritual life. I think this example in Maccabees is just bringing in a very dramatic story, the whole question that you posed first. Do we even know what life is? Well, clearly, this mother had brought up her sons to understand that we don't understand everything that life is, but that we have every reason to trust that God is somehow going to be as faithful to us after this physical death as he has shown himself all of these thousands of years.
The second question is, do we truly know what is meant by marriage? What stuck out to me was in Luke chapter 20, that verse 33, where the Sadducees asked, now at the resurrection, whose wife will that woman be? For all seven had been married to her. And what stuck out to me about this question was it still centers on the people and not on God. They're relating the woman, the wife, to the men. They're not relating the woman to God. And I think that's what stood out to me is like, they're not getting it. We're talking about afterlife, after death, where if we were to enter into communion with God, why are we not relating ourselves to God? And I think that's where, in this sense, we're not fully getting what marriage is meant to be, because even in other readings where it speaks about the joining of the bride and the groom, Jesus with us, with his church, that is, I think, showing the utmost model or the perfect union, perfect marriage. And that's where our minds are meant to kind of elevate and our understanding is meant to elevate. And from that kind of idea, we are meant to then, in our earthly marriages, aim for. But we can then apply our earthly marriage and then speaking to something divine and applying to the same kind of understanding. And I think that's where, even in that question, it just says they don't get what marriage is, and the Sadducees don't get afterlife.
And this is what I was reading recently that I had never thought of before. I think Jesus' answer directly challenged the patriarchy of marriage in first century Palestine. And that's certainly ongoing, isn't it? I mean, there still is patriarchy in the institution of marriage. That response of Jesus against patriarchy actually argues for what you're saying. Absolutely. The sacrament of marriage, it makes visible the divine life. specifically the Trinitarian life. This whole idea of agapic love, that you give yourself selflessly to another, and then that generates new life. Most times physically in children, but it can be generative in lots of ways into what you bring to life in goodness, justice, kindness, fairness, courage, compassion. All of that is generativity that comes from reflecting the divine way of loving with another person. So marriage absolutely reflects the divine, and specifically Trinitarian love.
So in verse 30 of 2nd Maccabees chapter 7, the youngest brother responded, "What is the delay? I will now obey the king's command. I obey the command of the law given to our ancestors through Moses." And I'm comparing that now to Luke chapter 20, verse 28, where the Sadducees said, "Teacher, Moses wrote for us, if someone's brother dies, leaving a wife but no child, his brother must take the wife and raise up descendants for his brother." Jesus then replied in verse 37 to 38 that the dead will rise, even Moses made known in the passage about the bush when he called Lord, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And so that brought just to mind how in these different verses, everyone's quoting Moses, but there's a way to read it and there's a way to understand it. We can get stuck at the superficial level and twist or bend things a certain way, which is really not the way it was meant to be understood. And if we do that, we lose entire meaning of the message. Jesus is offering life, but because we can be confined to exact texts, exact verses, we can't be open to fully understanding what is meant by that, because the meaning is much more broader than that.
When Jesus specifically quotes Moses, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, he uses Moses, who is the only authority that the Sadducees accept, in a way that reveals God as the isness of God, continually present, right? So not the God that was the God of Abraham, that was the God of Isaac, that was the God of Jacob. God remains Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's God. It was just such a great comeback. It was so strong. It was so powerful in its simplicity and clarity, and very softly challenged all this bravado that belonged to the Sadducees, which even had them pose this question to Jesus, this ludicrous question to Jesus.
The Sadducees, based on kind of what you just reminded me, they only held certain books, the Old Testament, as authoritative. And so they're going to God and saying, based on these sacred writings, we're going to define or limit what you, God, can do. And if they live in that mindset, they're not going to get it until God comes to them and shows a flaw in their arguments. And so a little bit more now, I'm extending this more. I'm not sure how far I can take it, but how are we Christians then going, I only base my understanding on the Old and New Testament, and I'm refusing to take in further, I would say, voices throughout history, people in their conduct, in their writings, who supplement God. And then we too can become like the Sadducees and be like, based on our very confined reading interpretation of scripture, this is not possible. At any point, God can come and tear our logic if we're strictly being confined to scripture in order to prove our own personal understanding. And God can come and just simply go in that same scripture, go, here's the truth. And then we won't have anything to respond to that.
Well, that's why Michael Heim's prayer, I think, is such a great one. God, keep on just being God. Don't let me ever limit your godness, is what I take from that prayer. Because the natural human movement, I think, is to lock down something that we find or perceive that is good. Okay, this is great. Now, how do I keep it? So we try different ways. We have laws, we build fences, we, Both of those, though, are confining and against this movement that God is, which is always better things for more people. It's always an ever broadening and expanding communion. And if it isn't that, then there should be a red flag there.
What stands out is what the mother says from the second Maccabees. I do not know how you came to be in my womb. It was not I who gave you breath and life. That speech by the mother says there's a mystery. We can never fully grasp it. We just know certain glimpses of that truth. God is the creator. God made a universe, but we can't fully define that. And going back to the beginning of it, do we truly know what life is? Do we truly know what death is? Do we truly know what afterlife, heaven, communion would be like? No, we don't, nor can we ever really truly grasp it. But we can try to hold on to the idea, understanding of God is the center of it.
Yeah, you're talking about trust. We can't explain it, but we trust the God who's driving this train. We don't need to have specifics. We have been loved into being, and God has a whole history of showing faithful love and presence. And that's why we can trust. We've talked about this before. The whole Old English root of the word believe comes from love. You can't believe if you haven't had that experience of love. But once you've had it, then you can believe. A true, generous, self-giving love. And if you're aware of that, then you can believe. The second letter of Paul to Timothy, I know whom I have believed, and I am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against this day, which is kind of the mother in Maccabees foreshadowing what Paul would write to Timothy so much later, really. I know whom I've believed. I'm okay. No matter what happens around me, I know God has loved me and I trust that love, and I'll just move forward with that. So hope is really part of this, isn't it? Hope because of the trust that you have in God, and then moving that into action that maybe, I don't know, sometimes I wonder, I really believe how we interact with one another can really help other people to trust that same love. I really do. I think maybe that's the biggest action that any Christian can do, because that action then can play across everything from a basic kindness of holding the door open for the next person behind you to a mother encouraging her sons not to fear the men who are killing them, like the mother in Maccabees. I mean, there's a whole continuum there, but I think the basic stance of the invitation to action coming out of that hope and trust, everything has a place between those 2 points, which are certainly very basic and small to courageous martyrdom.
The word that comes to my mind is witness. And as we become a witness for others, even this story of the mother, her 7 children, their actions are still affecting us however many years afterwards. Whoever reads that story is still affected by that faith, that hope, that love for God. So the impact of being such a witness can be everlasting.
That's a beautiful way to say it. And we need to keep hearing. Some things we need to keep saying, we need to keep hearing.